I think we should just start it off funny.
We'll go in phases.
We'll go in phases, but maybe we started off funny.
That's easy.
So I had cancer.
Yeah.
I had cancer. I didn't think I was going to have cancer, but I had cancer. How did you find out?
Cancer.
I didn't tell you I was in the hospital.
I heard from Jen.
Our sister.
She called me while I was watching a college football game. And I heard you had kidney stones, and I felt sad. And
About the kidney stones.
But I wasn't worried, because, they were just kidney stones.
Right. And then?
It was weeks until I heard it was definite. Well,
Oh, really?
definitely, yeah. That was
I stayed
highly
out of that.
possible.
Yeah. So we should probably talk about the whole cancer thing. The elephant in the room. I have been missing MIA from social media for 4 months now. 3 months, 4 months. Dealing with this. So at the 2018 was rolling around. I was already getting a month jump and trying to eat better, working out. We had just joined Lifetime earlier, well, in the summer. And
So you're on a health mission already.
well, I was trying to make adjustments already, and I was investigating throughout the year or two different, I call them nuances within health, like our grandfather got really sick when he was, I think, 11, and no one knows what kind of sickness, but he got really sick, and we were told that he read a lot, went to the library and read a lot, went to seminars and stuff,
And his sister gave him that stack of books
health books.
that he would point to.
And this was probably 1920s, early 20s by that time.
Yeah.
And he had these philosophies on how to eat, when to drink water, how to drink water.
Not to drink water while eating a meal.
Yeah, for some reason he never drank while he ate. But
And he looked at you if you're a child, drinking while you're eating dinner with an eye of disappointment.
he was very disappointed in all of us, especially you. No, but I digress. So he discovered all these nuances, just that, of health. So he believed in the real elephant in the room and enemas. He was a big fan of enemas.
The hose.
The hose, as
some
he
would
called it.
call
And all sorts of things. But he lived till he was 93.
Yes.
He owned his own electrical company, going up 30-foot ladders until he was 88 or something like that. So something worked. So I had already been looking into that kind of stuff, trying to figure out, different things to stay away from, different things to add. I had been on a vitamin D regimen. I was listening to, I believe it was a Tim Ferriss podcast, where a gymnastics coach was getting strep throat like 5 times a year. He ran into another coach. He mentioned vitamin D drops. He hadn't had strep throat in like 6 years at that time. And so I started doing it 2 years ago. I was getting strep throat 5-6 times a year.
Sinus infections.
Sinus infections, all that stuff. So I was taking 6,000 IUs, international units a day.
Right.
And I didn't get sick. I didn't have the flu. I never got flu shots. I didn't have strep throat. I didn't have anything. So I actually thought I was doing well. And then the morning of January 6th happened. It was a Saturday, the first Saturday of the new year. And I woke up at about 4 o'clock in the morning in an excruciating amount of pain in my lower back on both sides. And I literally fell out of bed. I fell to the floor. It hurt so bad. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was, I had thought it was kidney stones because what else would it be? But I didn't know what it was.
Were you feeling it on the side? Or
It
your
was
back?
on the back of my bottom of my lower back on
Okay.
both sides.
Both sides.
It was this dull internal agony. They later described it as it's the male version of, I mean, females can get it too, but it's the male version of labor pains.
Right. Is it sharp like a sensation of a knife? You said dull.
It
so I
was
wanna
more
say
of a dull
no, but it's pretty
aching
intense.
pain. It was intense.
Okay.
Yeah. So it hurt really bad. So I tried to fight it off. I tried to get it to stop. I was laying on the floor. I was laying over things. I remember there was this, I don't know what you call it. Hassock sounds like an old term kind of word, but the kids have these almost like beanbag things.
Right.
And I was laying on that to try to relieve it. That didn't help. So finally we rushed to the hospital and had an MRI and a CAT scan, or just one of those. I can't remember. And that's when the fun began. I was
So you're still in pain.
still in pain.
You're going through
They gave me
scans that are
morphine
uncomfortable.
at the hospital. So I was
Okay.
on 6 units of morphine per every hour and a half, I think.
Okay.
I think around that time, around that.
Sounds like a lot.
It was a lot. And then my wife and my 2 kids were in the emergency room with me. This was probably about 6 o'clock in the morning by this time.
Wow.
And then a doctor came in. I've never seen this guy before. And that's when the fun started.
Was he just an ER doctor?
He was an ER doctor. And he asked everyone to leave. And I remember just thinking, well, that's weird. Why is he asking everybody to leave? But I never thought in a million years it would be to tell me anything bad. I actually thought, maybe this is like a privacy thing.
Right.
He maybe didn't get my signatures on stuff.
Because you just went in for what you thought was kidney stones.
Yeah, because why else would
You had
I?
some scans, which
Because I mentioned all this stuff because
look
I was
at
doing
it.
pretty well. I was vitamin D. I had over the last year I had dropped my cholesterol, dramatically. I was doing really well. I hadn't been sick in 2 years, so I was a little confused.
Yeah.
So they left and he drew the curtain closed and he sat down. He got really close to my face, like this close. For those just listening, about a foot away, and he was just somber. And then I was just like, "Oh no, what's this? What's this all about?" And you start thinking things, but
Yeah.
it's happening so fast you don't even know what you're thinking.
Right.
And he says, "Mr. Prather, the imaging came back, and you do have kidney stones. It's in whatever one, I don't even know. And it's this far down, and it's probably this big, and blah blah blah." And I said, "Okay." And then he paused, and then he says, "Well, we also you have cancer. We found cancer in your kidney." And it was that moment where
He went straight toward saying
He
it
just
was
went
cancer
straight for it.
versus
And you know
saying we
what?
found something else.
that guy has a miserable job in terms of that part of his job.
Yeah.
You're delivering that kind of news. He didn't want to deliver that news. But the thing is, he didn't know me. He doesn't know me. He was the doctor on call at the hospital, his shift.
Right.
He's reading off of some, report or imaging scan or something, and he was the one elected to tell me about this cancer.
How did he know it was cancer at that point? Looking at images, how did he know for certain to come into the room and tell you that?
From what I learned later, when you're looking at this imaging, I want to say it was an animated image video. You could just tell it's this dark area, I think, how they describe it. We can get into it later, but they could just tell. It's like a black sheep down there, just something that shouldn't be down there. That didn't make any sense, the black sheep analogy, now that I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, I've never heard of a black sheep
No.
on images, but it kind of
Go
makes
with
sense.
it.
Yeah.
Go with it.
Sure.
So
Or cloud, maybe.
it was just something that shouldn't have been there, that they knew that shouldn't have been there. And what I learned later was that kidney cancer is actually very prevalent. It happens a lot more times than you think.
Okay.
So I just remember time just stopped.
Did he leave immediately?
No, he just sat there. He sat there and looked at me, really.
Okay.
He just watched me process this. And I asked him maybe 5 times to repeat himself because I just didn't think I heard what I thought I heard.
Right.
And I would just say, what did you just say? And he would say, we're fairly certain you have cancer. Well, and it was a lot of this, a lot of, stuttering and just kind of like.
Did he ever change what he said? Did he ever
Nah.
say like, and then we will do this, or
Not for the
day
first couple.
will look like this
not
for today?
not for the first couple questions or repeat requests of mine. And I just remember the time just stopped, and I literally would have to shake my head to try to like get the quote unquote cobwebs out because I just didn't think I was. It felt like a weird world, like this wasn't reality.
Yeah, you're not expecting that.
It wasn't. Yeah, it was a kick to the stomach. I'll never forget that moment. I mean, even now thinking about it, it was for those who have had that conversation with a doctor. It's something that never leaves you. It just, you think about it, and it's like that movie moment, I think, when it's an outer body experience where you're somewhere in the room and you're looking down at this situation happening because you don't feel like it's you.
Right.
Because why would it be? And you don't expect those things to happen. So it's really kind of like an outer body experience. Your life does flash before your eyes. I was thinking of all these things like boom, 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 boom. And then when I finally realized, okay, this is actually really happening, he leaves and he goes, well, you know, you're going to have more imaging in another half an hour or so just to verify this and that and whatever and to see if it's spread.
Okay.
And when he said that, I thought, oh no, this.
So at that point, he wanted to do a more full body.
He wanted to do a
scan
torso
see
scan and blood work to see if there were any indicators that it had spread. And he did mention if it had went to any other organs or my bones.
Right.
And then he left. And then shut the curtain again. And I was in there by myself. And it felt like 10 minutes, but I just sat there and wanted to think about it. And I was still stunned. I was in a state of shock. And the very first thing I thought of was, all right, well, do I have to sell my company now? Like, does this mean I can't work anymore? Is this it? Not it as in death, but it is a long road has been placed in front of me all of a sudden. And it's all uphill. Does that mean I sell my company? Does that mean I'm not going to be able to work? Does that mean chemo? Does that mean this? Does that mean that? What does this mean? I don't know if it's spread.
Right.
And then you start thinking of there's something in my body right now that's foreign that I don't want in my body, but I don't know how bad it was at the time.
Right.
Or good it was. I didn't know anything. And then that didn't last that long. Honestly, a couple seconds. That just thought but the very next thought I had was, you know, you think about your family, your kids, and all that stuff, but then you go into this is my experience. I went into survival mode.
How do you mean?
How am I? Not how, but I'm going to get through this. I don't know how bad it is, but there was no option of dying in my mind. Primarily because I have these 2 kids that I need to be there for, and my job's not done with them. I didn't, that's not up to me, but I don't feel it is. So, I just kind of just thought, all right, I'm going to you mentally flip a switch of, well, I'm going to turn those fears off and just start thinking of how I can get through this. Unfortunately, I can't really think about, I can't rationalize all that because I don't know what's going on. I don't know so you kind of go into this purgatory. And then I immediately went to, why did this happen? Not why God did this happen? Why did you do this to me? But what am I supposed to get out of this? And quite honestly, we should probably go back a couple months. A lot of changes have happened in my personal life. My wife and I had been separated for many years at the time. You know, we lost Dad around that same time to cancer, and that hit me pretty profoundly, watching him fight cancer for about 16 months or so. And then, back in this trying to get healthy, I started to swim. So I was swimming a mile a week, and I developed swimmer's ear, and they may or may not have been related, but in late November and all of December, I was just about deaf. I had so much water inside my ear canal, and it probably didn't have anything to do with the swimming. This was a perfect storm, but I had a lot of fluid built up in my ear canals, and my body wasn't naturally allowing that to drain, so I couldn't hear anything. So actually at the hospital during all this was the height of my lack of hearing, where I had people basically being translators for me because I couldn't hear. I mean, I could stand over the Christmas break. I couldn't hear you sitting this close.
Right.
And it was worse in the morning for some reason. But so I had gone through that, was currently going through that. I was actually scheduled to get earplugs soon around that time.
For swimming?
No, just to release the pressure
Okay.
out of those ears. Swimming probably didn't help it, but it was all internal. It didn't have anything with swimming, I think. And then we got into a bad car accident in the beginning of December, where someone T-bowed us and then forced us into oncoming traffic, and we hit head on with somebody that was trying to turn, thankfully.
And
But
that could have gone gnarly if that other car wasn't there.
if that other car wasn't there, we would have been dead, because the cars that he basically prevented us from hitting were going 40, 50 miles per hour, and we would have hit them dead on. But fortunately, we got out of the car, walked out of the car with none of us had a scratch on us.
Yeah.
And the kids, quite honestly, thought it was like a roller coaster ride. I don't want to say enjoyed it, but they weren't fazed one bit.
Right.
So it was a lot going on up until that. The couple months prior to all that, there was a lot going on. And so I sat there and I thought, okay, am I going to have to sell my company? I'm not dealing with that right now. Let's move to the second thing, which is, just trying to process all this. And then you go into, why did this happen? Survival mode. Then why did this happen? And again, it wasn't a God, why? Why'd you do this to me? It was, why did this happen? And I instantly thought, well, wait a minute. I just about was deaf. I got into a car accident, and now this happens. What is God trying to tell me? Because he's trying to tell me something. And I want to talk about that for a second. This is not a religious podcast or a Christian podcast or anything like that. But let me tell you something. One thing that bothers me, and one thing I left out, was that I started this podcast in November with the desire to create a podcast that, it was initially, I'm a flawed human being. I procrastinate. I fall behind on stuff. I want better for my life, just like everybody else. And in the business that I'm in as a TV director, film director, and own a digital agency, that I've had the pleasure of working with some people over the years. I'm going to adjust the levels here. I've had the pleasure of working with people over the years that have been successful. And I've been successful, but just when you look yourself in the mirror, you start picking things that you wish you could fix, and everybody has that. So I thought, well, the name of my company is The Blue Wave. Our logo is We Make Waves. Let's do a podcast that's loosely connected to that, but it's really my journey of, hey, I'm flawed. Let me interview these people that I work with and have worked with and interview them about how they made waves in their lives and career. And maybe we can unpack those steps. And then, I had that information and then I can give it out to everybody else via this podcast, because why keep it for me? That would be just selfish. So that's the reason of this podcast. That was the genesis of this podcast. But in the first couple months of doing the podcast, I'm so proud of the interviews that we did. And we got so much good information out of them. So I don't want to take away from those podcast episodes and my great guests that were a part of those. But something was bothering me in the month of December about the podcast. And at the end of the day, it was, you could get this information from anybody else. You could go to a Tim Ferriss, you could go to a Joe Rogan, you could go to something similar to that. And one thing was bothering me was I wasn't really telling my story within the podcast, my point of view and my successes or my failures. And I wasn't opening up personally in the podcast. That was bothering me. And the other thing was the fact that faith wasn't discussed in the podcast, because at the end of the day, it's very important to me. It's been important to me all my life, whether, or I should say, despite the times that I doubted, and those went on for years, those spans, it still was something I thought about every day or fought every day, or, and I think we all have that, maybe a lot of us have that same kind of story. And I wasn't sharing that story, or I wasn't allowing my guests to share that story as well. And oftentimes I would get frustrated in society that it's okay to talk about God when you won the Super Bowl or when you won the Oscar or when you Grammy. It's okay, and people allow you to do that. But if you talk about it outside of those events, people kind of look at you differently and think, well, you're not supposed to talk about that, or they look at you funny. And I thought, you know what, screw that. It's part of my story. It's part of my life, and I'm going to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So that's what I thought about minutes after this guy left the room, the doctor left the room. I think God was tapping me on my shoulder during the whole losing my hearing thing. He was tapping me on my shoulder certainly during the accident. And you go back to living the way you were living before, and you don't listen to the tapping. And for me, I just knew in that moment that the tapping was, hey, I'm going to make you slow down really hard right now. And it's not going to be over right away. And I'm going to give you a road to go down that you're going to have to fight, and you're going to have journeys on that road. That's not, and those journeys are going to last for a while. But I'm only allowing that to happen so you get this right. And it's going to be a constant reminder of you need to, do the right things. And we'll get into even what that means. But so I thought about that, and the first thing I thought of was this podcast of this is a purpose of mine, to talk about it and to share my story and share this story of cancer, because there's a lot of people out there. And again, excuse me, this is my story. This isn't anybody else's story. So this isn't, this is the way to get through cancer and this is the way to fight cancer. This is just how I did it, mm-hmm. and the things that I believe. And if it could help anybody else out, then great. But it by no means should be used as a blueprint of this will work for you, or do exactly what I say, or by no means is this medical advice by any means, because I'm not a doctor, but this is my individual story that I went through. Right. So I thought about that, wrapped my head around it, and then I called my wife and the kids in, and I just broke down as soon as I saw my kids. And I just started crying, and I tried to keep it together because
When's the last time you think they've seen their dad cry before that?
They see their dad cry quite often. I'm a big baby. No, you know what? I'm an emotional guy. I'll admit that. There's movies that'll get me where Sadie, my 8-year-old, will look over at me and just start laughing because Daddy's getting teary-eyed because of some dog movie, because the dog died in the movie. I'm a sucker for that.
Right.
But they've seen me get upset. But what I'll say is, when they see Daddy get upset, they know that Daddy's upset for something.
Right.
They also know, and we'll get into this when we talk about recovery and all that, but I'm militant, and I take I'm a fighter. Let's just say that. So whether it's someone, bothering us or attacking us or physically or some strange dude coming over us when we're trying to get to the car, there's nothing I wouldn't do to be able to see those kids again. Mm-hmm. So that's the mode I went into when the doctor told me. So I had asked, actually, let me back up. I had asked Linda to come in first, and left the kids outside in the hallway. And I told her what was going on, and it was hard, to tell her that, and it was hard just to say it out loud. And I didn't say the word. I don't know if I said the word cancer, but that was very hard to tell someone that. And
it's like you're owning it in some way. You're accepting that.
It makes it real.
Reality.
Yeah. And she was great, She put up a good front. And then the kids came in, and I just remember all of us literally all four of us in the bed, in this little hospital bed, just laying there. And I should say now, I did not tell the kids. One of them still doesn't know. But didn't tell the kids, but we just all just kind of, I enjoyed that moment that we were having right there. And however long I had left, I was going to enjoy every single moment. So the ironic part about this is that I became aware of a church out in Los Angeles from a friend of mine on Instagram that posted some picture about this church called Mosaic. And, I go out to Los Angeles to work, and, it's an interesting place. I love it. If you guys weren't on the East Coast, I'd be out there in a heartbeat, but I stay for you guys, so I just want you to know my sacrifice.
We were out there together.
We were out there together. So when I first heard about this church and this pastor, Erwin McManus, I thought, I rolled my eyes, and I thought, oh my God, it's one of these LA churches.
Erwin McManus.
Erwin McManus. Okay. And I thought, it's one of these LA churches, where everything goes, and, they probably had, what's that incense? What's that stuff that people like cleanse their room with?
Okay.
Whatever that is.
And bells.
Bells and,
I would just think that they would be playing Beatles songs or something.
Yeah, like a hippie church or something. And something prompted me. This was going back in the summer. Prompted me. Let me see what's going on at this church. And I loved it. And again, I think we all
You're checking him out online?
Checking him out online.
Okay.
And I just found he's a cool guy. He was a fashion designer. He was a TV producer at one point. That's what I do. And he just spoke from the heart, wore his feelings on his sleeve as I saw it on these online things. And I just instantly really liked and gravitated towards this guy in the church. Well, he had come out with a book all around this time called The Last Arrow. And The Last Arrow was living your best life now, And there's this story in the Bible about this. It was all written on this one story in the Bible about Elisha, a prophet, and then there was this king. And Elisha was on his deathbed. I think the king saw this as he's my last kind of connection to God, so let me ask him for some advice. And I'm butchering the story, by the way, but the Elisha says, well, grab a bow and an arrow and shoot it out that window towards your enemy, and then God will deliver you from the enemy, blah, blah, blah. Well, then the last thing he says, well, grab your arrows and strike them on the ground. And he struck them 3 times, pounded them into the ground 3 times, and Elisha got really pissed off and was like, why didn't you do it 5 or 6 times? You basically half-assed it. Mm-hmm. Why did you do that? And he got really mad, and he ended up dying after that. And the whole moral of that was just fight as hard as you can. Give it everything that you have. And Erwin was writing this book about that. And the ironic part about his book was, if I remember correctly, he wrote the manuscript and he found out that he had cancer. Doctor he had that same experience.
Okay.
Doctor sat him down and told him that he had cancer. And when he got home, he opened up his manuscript just to kind of self-edit it before he handed it off to the publisher, if I understand the story correctly. And the first lines that he read was, "There's something I need to tell you. I'm dying." And it just was jarring to him that he wrote that a year ago, not knowing that he had cancer. And at the end of that, I think, I don't have the book in front of me. I wanted to bring it, but it went on to say, "But you were dying too. We're all dying," kind of thing.
Right.
So the book is about just living. He was writing a book about, before you die, pound your last arrow. And at the time he was writing it, he was potentially dying of cancer himself. And that book really changed my life, because I had gotten halfway through that book before I was told I had cancer. So I was about halfway through when I was told I had cancer, and then one of the first things I thought of was, I need to finish this book. I need to get back home out of this hospital and finish that book, because I got so much comfort from it
Right.
prior to being told I had cancer that I knew that there was something in it for me to live by and apply. So I started the book over again.
Yeah. There's new meaning you could probably
Yeah.
get out of that with the perspective of cancer.
So I started reading it over again, got a lot of good things out of it. But so that was the diagnosis. So later that day, I had a new MRI or CAT scan where they put the injection in you, the ink,
Right.
or the liquid.
Contrast?
Contrast. Then I had blood work done, and it was about a half a day where we just kind of sat around, just kind of stewing on all this. And by that time, they had sent me up to our normal room and sent the kids home with my sister, your sister, and and then an oncologist came in, which is like a cancer doctor. And he came in and he started to go into things, and I just completely cut him off.
That morning.
This is that evening.
Okay.
Because we spent all day not knowing if it had spread, if it was in my bones, how bad it was.
Right. So lots of questions.
Lots of questions.
He comes in.
He came in and I cut him off, and I'm like, "Listen, I understand you're talking to me right now, but I just have one thing to ask you. Am I going to be okay? I have 2 kids. Am I going to be okay?" And he stopped and looked at me, and he goes, "I get it. Yes, you're going to be okay." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" And he goes, "Well, you do have cancer, most likely. We won't know till we get in there, but all signs point that you have cancer. And it appears that it has not spread. It seems contained in the kidney, and quite honestly, we see this all the time. Sadly, we see it all the time. So you're probably never going to see me again. You're going to be handed off to the urologist." I said, "So you're telling me I'm going to be okay?" He goes, "Yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't be. We caught it." He goes, "You're going to be fine." So
At this point, did he know where it was?
yeah,
In totality?
they knew which kidney was in, where it was in the kidney, how much it kind of overtook the kidney.
And they knew it wasn't anywhere else.
To the best of their knowledge, based on the scan and blood
Right.
work, they didn't think it went anywhere else.
Okay.
So I went back to sleep. I'm still on a lot of morphine. I'm still dealing with, by the way,
The kidney stone.
kidney stones. So, which was funny, because the kidney stones became so secondary, is even though
distraction.
they hurt tremendously, still they became secondary to I have cancer. So, all in all, it was good news, right? But there's still that sense of unknown. Well, did they really see what they saw?
Right. What did they miss?
What did they miss? Let me talk to this urologist, all this stuff. And by that time, Linda had left the room to take care of the kids, or to get all that lined up. And I was asleep, and this guy taps me on my feet. And it was a urologist. Well, I had a procedure about 10 years ago. And this guy was my urologist. So he happened to be on call at the hospital. And he looks at me and goes, "How do I know you?" He goes, "We've met before." And I said, "Yeah, you've been inside of me." And he just kind of looks at me and he goes, "Oh, I remember you." He goes, "Hey, by the way, you probably have a lot of questions, but let me tell you." And I said, "Am I going to be okay?" Like I basically ran him through the same thing I ran through the other guy,
Right.
the oncologist. And he goes, "Listen, I see this all the time." He goes, "So what's going on is you have cancer." And they always kind of have to position this as we're not, 9.9, times out of 10, this is going to be cancer.
Right.
I'm not even doing a biopsy. I'm taking your kidney out. We just have to schedule that. And if you got a trip to Disney World with the kids, don't change that. This can wait. And I remember looking at him going, "What do you mean this can wait? I got cancer in me. We got to
Yeah,
get
I'd be
this
like,
thing
take
out."
it out. What's your schedule tonight?
Yeah, are you doing anything tonight? You got dinner plans? Let's take this thing out. So he's like, "Listen, you've probably had this for years." Like,
Really?
yeah, like years. It's extremely slow growing, and it's contained. It's almost like encapsulated within your kidney. It has not spread, didn't go anywhere. The blood work came back. It's not in your bones. Your other kidney's working perfectly, by the way. So we're just going to take this out.
Have you since learned that if kidney cancer is common, if it usually is a contained thing?
Well, there's all sorts of kidney cancer. The kind that he sees a lot of times is kind of what I had.
Okay.
And then my general practitioner, when I had to go in to get my pre-op surgery, kind of said the same thing. And sadly, he does this operation. I want to say I remember him saying once a week.
Wow.
Yeah. So all that was good news. And then you're kind of left there with what's next. So I ended up being in the hospital 2 days, went home, still hadn't passed the kidney stone. They gave me Oxycontin to take home.
Uh-huh.
And I don't take medicine generally, pain pills.
It's got to be worth it.
It's got to be really something happening. And we'll get into this during the recovery aspect, but it's not a macho thing, because that's what all the doctors say. Well, don't be a macho guy, take your medicine and all that. It's not that. It's one, I don't want to be addicted to anything. I have addicted personality, and not that I've ever had a problem with any of that stuff, but I don't want to have a problem with any of that stuff. I know that that's a slippery slope, and if the amount of pain that I was in, I knew that I needed a lot, I'd rather the doctors give me the morphine. It's, they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be sent home with a bottle of Oxycontin, nor do I want it in the house with the kids, and that whole thing. So I never got it prescribed. I never got it filled. So I went home without anything. But let me go back. The other reason why I don't try to take that stuff, whether it's even aspirin, is I think that masks things. So I want to be in tune with my body and what my body's doing in that moment, and not know, because do I feel good because it's the aspirin or the Oxycontin or the more, whatever, or is it I'm actually feeling better now? So I just want to know the truth about what I'm feeling. So that kind of leads to what next, which is the period that I call the wait. Went back for a follow-up the next week, and the surgery was going to be 5.5 weeks later. They couldn't get me in earlier than that. So the week that I got home from the hospital, my son got strep throat. I ended up getting strep throat, and I believe because I didn't really, during the whole November and December, because I was going through all the stuff with my ears, I stopped taking the vitamin D, and all of a sudden I get strep throat.
There was a pandemic at your house.
It was crazy.
It was boiling.
So I was forced to be bedridden pretty much that week, and I was coming off of morphine. I mean, they gave me morphine, hard morphine, for 2 straight days at the hospital. So I was coming off that. I had strep throat. Noah had strep throat. And I was forced to think about stuff. And I remember just telling myself, I need to wrap my head around this, because I can't let this weigh me down. I understand that they say I'm going to be okay. I understand that, this is good news on paper. I mean, on anything, it's good news. But still, having that moment where someone tells you you have cancer, knowing that cancer is in you, there's still a lot of, they're going to open me up during this operation. They might find something, or, anything could happen.
Right.
So it's just a lot to deal with. So I just knew, and I made a promise to myself that I had to wrap my head around this week. And I had already kind of written off work for the week. So, and that's what I did. And I really sat there and thought about it hard. And it was scary, and I cried a lot that week, and it's just a lot to kind of confront. But in that Last Arrow book, Irwin talks about this parable, which changed my whole perspective on just life in general, really. That there were these group of lepers that had obviously leprosy. Their skin was being eaten by something, and back in those days they were outcasts. They got kicked out of their villages and societies and stuff. So these lepers were kicked out of their village, and they were outside of, and again, I'm paraphrasing this, but they were outside of an enemy's village, outside of the gates. And they're sitting out there going, well, what are we going to do? We're dying out here. We just got kicked out of our home. We're dying out here. And we're going to die out here. But if we go inside these gates, chances are they're going to kill us. But there is an off chance that they'll take mercy on us and take us in. But rest assured, we're still dying out here. And they paced overnight back and forth about what to do. And in the morning, they decided, well, we're going to take our chance and try to have the best life possible. It's a leap, but we're going to go in the gates. So when they went inside the gates, knocked on the gates open, and they found that no one was in there. Now, the parable will say that God amplified their walking and made it sound like a lot of, thousands of people pacing outside, and they got the enemies were afraid and fled and left everything. They left their food and their riches and their golds and their jewels and stuff. And these lepers that decided to live life now and live the best life now, I don't want to say were rewarded with all this stuff, but they found all this stuff at their disposal. So how I applied that, and quite honestly, I had stopped reading the book at that point. So I caught up to that point when I started to reread the book, and I came to that, and I had stopped there in the parable. And up until that point, I realized the moral of that story is we're going to die, and I'm going to die anyway, whether it's this cancer that's going to kill me, or whether it's a car accident, or whether it's just old age. I'm going to die. This life is temporary. So it's just a matter of when that's going to happen. And I have to make the choice to live that best life now. So I can sit here for the next 5 weeks and agonize over it and wonder if it's going to be bad, or wonder if they're going to find all this extra stuff, or wonder, is it going to spread? They found out they were wrong, because doctors are wrong sometimes. Or am I going to basically go through the gates of my life for those riches and gold, which are being with my family and being with my kids and experiencing life and going places and doing things? Because I thought at the end of the day, if I live the best life now and strike all my arrows now, let's say in 5.5 weeks they tell me the cancer came back and I only have 2 weeks left. Well, at least I had the time of my life, and at least my relationships grew. At least I had an impact on people. At least I served. Whereas, I didn't waste any time, I lived the best life possible. If I had wasted those 5.5 weeks and got frustrated and upset and doubted and all this kind of stuff, if they had told me, hey, you're good, everything's went as planned, then I just wasted 5.5 weeks of my life. So that really hit home with me. And that really formed the way I was going to approach this in the period that I call the wait. So at the end of that week, I was okay. I was really okay, and I wasn't afraid. I had good days and bad days, or good moments, not bad days, but bad moments, and where it's only natural to doubt and natural to fear that stuff. But
Right.
other than that, I was actually good, and I got to a point by the end of that week that I was happy that it happened. I was happy I had cancer. I was happy that I had a chance to slow down and really think about what was going on in my life and really think about what I wanted to do with it. And now I felt super hyper focused. I felt that my purpose in life had been neglected for a long time, and now I can go back to the things that really matter. I learned that you're not in control of your life. There's things that you can control, but overall, it could be taken away from you in a second.
Yeah, you're mostly out of control.
You're mostly out of control.
And it's
So,
times like this that opens your eyes to see that
yeah.
you really aren't. There's so much in life you have no control over.
So after I wrapped my head around it, how was I going to face this? And I thought about Dad. He was a stubborn man too, and very rigid in how he did things.
In different ways.
Rigid of how he liked his hot dogs cooked. Rigid of how
Boiled.
Boiled. And we watched him and helped him go through his cancer fight for 16 months. And I hesitate to say this because I'm not bagging on him. But when he was going through his cancer, I remember mentally writing down notes of, okay, I'm not doing that, and I'm not doing that, and I'm not going to live that way, and I'm not going to, if that ever happened to me, I'm not going to handle it that way. I'm going to fight. And I mean, he would leave chemotherapy. I always say this. He would leave chemotherapy and go straight to Five Guys.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with Five Guys, but that's probably not what you should be eating. And, you could take the stance of, well, he smoked 50 years. He's got lung cancer. It went to his brain. Give him a break. He doesn't have any time left. Let him enjoy it. I looked at it even in that moment of, yeah, but there's still a chance. Like the lepers. Fight. Do what you can to live a day longer, to be with your kids and your grandkids. Like, even if it's a day longer, do whatever you can to last even a day longer. And so I had completely changed my diet by this time. I went pretty much plant-based. The weekend that I came home from the hospital, I had watched this documentary called Forks Over Knives, and it's basically a meat-hating documentary. And I am a carnivore. I live off of cheeseburgers and bacon and all that stuff. And I still love, for the most part, all that stuff. But this documentary basically linked meat with cancer. And I thought, well, I have cancer. I don't want to put anything in my body that's going to make it even worse. So I had mentioned earlier that I had been looking into healthy way of living and the nuances of health and really diving into the genes of it all. And I reached out to this doctor her name is Dr. Her name is Dr. Rhonda Patrick. I heard her on the Joe Rogan podcast. And what I love about her, and I hope I hope she feels I'm saying this accurately, and I hope he doesn't take offense to this, Dr. Oz, but like doctors like Dr. Oz, there's speculation that, well, let me just say this because I don't want to get sued. She comes from a place of analytics and data. She's not being encouraged to say something because some pharmaceutical company or some, the pork industry or this and that, or whatever is forcing her or paying her off or anything like that. She's involved in studies or knows people that are involved in studies or just takes studies and analytically dissects them and goes over the facts.
She has more reason to be just straight objective.
She's objective, straight down the middle, and gives you information. So I reached out to her, and she was so kind enough last year to answer a lot of my questions. And we would go back and forth for a couple months or so about things that I had questions about, and vitamin D and all sorts of things. And she was a great help then. So I had reached out to her when all this happened, primarily about meat. I just watched this Forks Over Knives. Is this true? Does meat cause cancer like they're kind of making it seem? And then also, what kind of diet? She specializes, let me say, and I think I'm saying this right. She's an expert in diet and how it translates to longevity, and how diet is connected to or just the correlation between cancer and diet, whether it's good or bad. So I reached out to her primarily to ask about meat, and then to say, hey, what kind of diet should I get on to fight cancer, kind of thing. So I wanted to be proactive. I was already in fighting mode. I wanted to get in the best health of my life going into the surgery. I wanted to eat the best things I could eat going into surgery. I wanted to go to the gym and prepare my body to go into surgery. So my body was going to accept surgery, if that makes any sense, well, and I was going to recuperate well. So she reached out, and I actually typed this up because I don't want to get it wrong. And again, this is not medical, advice, but I have applied it primarily to my life. Her response about meat was, and again, I'm a carnivore, that it's not that meat causes cancer, but meat, it's that the essential amino acids in meat can activate IGF-1, which is insulin-like growth factor 1, which allows cancer to grow but does not cause cancer. So if I understood it correctly, it's this amino acid that's found in all meat basically prevents your body from fighting the cancer that's already in your body anyway. We have cancer cells in our body, and our immune system fights those off every day, often. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how often, but meat does that. And part of me was sad by that news because I'm a meat guy.
You cried.
I probably cried.
Probably.
But at the end of the day, when you have cancer, you start thinking, who cares about a hamburger anymore? So I'm going to give two plugs that really, I say, saved my life. But it's Beyond Meat and Impossible Burgers. So I had found out about both of these two companies the year before. And again, I think all things happen for a reason. And I think many times in life, whether you believe in God or whether you believe in just fate or people say the universe, I can look back at the last 2 years of my life, the last 5 years, but the last 2 years of my life, and how I was making steps to prepare me for this cancer diagnosis. And I was looking into health and looking into those things. So that's when I found 2 years ago about those two meats. Now, Impossible Burger, they got, I think it was $100 million.
You even called it meat, which might be instructive to what this stuff is to you.
Yeah. Impossible Burgers got $100 million investment or capital, whatever, financing, to go into the lab with scientists to figure out what proteins in meat make it smell that way, taste that way, feel that way, look that way, all that stuff. And they came up with this Impossible Burger that I'm telling you, I've taken. So
it's fully plant-based.
It's fully plant-based. And what they found was that protein was hemoglobin that they've found exist in the root of soy.
Right.
So they extracted the hemoglobin, and that's what gives gives meat certainly the color, redness, and I think the smell and a couple other things. And there's different smelling profiles that they investigated and basically put into this burger. And at the time, about a year and a half ago, I'd say, they weren't selling it in stores or at restaurants, rather. It wasn't available, but they did have it like in a handful or one or two restaurants in San Francisco where they're out there in Silicon Valley. So that was never really a practical thing for me to try at the time. But then I remember Sadie last summer wanted to have me make hamburger sliders at home. So I went to Whole Foods, and I had already switched everything over to organic well into last year, maybe the year before. organic everything. I switched to almond milk because I thought maybe there was a connection with milk and all my sinus issues that I was having and the strep throats and stuff. So I went to Whole Foods. And by the way, you know me. I am not one of these earthy, and no offense to earthy people, but I'm not wearing the Birkenstocks and the socks and the Birkenstocks, and I'm not hugging trees, and I'm not.
You're active with the hacky sack, but
I do not own a hacky sack, nor have I ever
okay.
used one. I think you have some.
You had one.
I've never had a hacky sack.
I played with it.
I don't even want to know what you're talking about. But I'm not that guy. I'm not a vegan. I'm not this. I'm not that. I'm just a dude that loves cheeseburgers. But I wanted to be around longer for my kids. So that's why I was investigating all this kind of stuff. And so I remember being at Whole Foods. I grabbed the hamburger meat. And then next to it was this Beyond Burger thing. It was 2 little patties, $5. Thought it was expensive. But I looked at it and it looked like hamburger meat. And something I remember being prompted internally of you try it, just try it. And that moment a year prior, however many months prior, changed my life, quite honestly, because during this time where I knew that I needed to cut back, well, not cut back, to not eat meat, certainly up until the operation, I started eating these Beyond Burgers. And it tastes like meat. And I chop them up, ground them up, and I use them as tacos and burritos and nachos and all sorts of stuff. I treat it like a hamburger. And it's been so easy to not eat meat because I have Beyond Burger. And since then, Impossible Burgers have released into restaurants all over the country. There's 2 restaurants 2 minutes from my house. So I'd go there a handful of times a week and sit at the bar and have an Impossible Burger. And I took friends there and I said, here, try my burger. And I didn't tell them.
You didn't tell them.
I didn't tell them. And they thought it was great. No one thinks this is a plant-based burger.
Could you ever taste the coconut bits? Not bits, but I know that in Impossible Burger there's some coconut.
I'll tell you this. When I cook at home with coconut oil, I can taste the coconut. It feels like whatever I made tastes like a pina colada on some level. With this, it doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll give a plug out to Beyond Meat, Beyond Burgers, and Impossible Burgers because they really got me through a really dark time in my life where if I didn't have those 2 things, it would have been a major struggle for me to give up meat. In the way that I did. So again, I'd go to the gym. And I tell you, the first time I went to the gym, it was a different feeling because I was going there to fight cancer. You know what I mean?
You have it in your body as you go.
I have it in my body and I'm going there to exorcise demons. It felt like, and I remember it was a very emotional time at the gym that kind of made me chuckle, but I was very emotional at the gym that day. And every push of a weight, I was just, it was full of emotion because it was, I don't know how to explain it, but
the late Stuart Scott of ESPN, when he had cancer, after he had chemotherapy, I remember hearing that he would go to the gym and work out after every bit, and I thought that was really powerful, that he was going to do well for his body.
I remember, when Lance Armstrong got cancer, he got the news and basically hopped on a stationary bike. And I always remembered that, thinking if I ever got cancer, going to get me a bike. I ended up not getting me a bike, but I would go to the gym quite often and I would do yoga and all that kind of stuff. And again, my thought was if I got my body right, it would be okay. My body would react to the surgery and respond to it well. So that was my thing. And those 5.5 weeks, it didn't help that it was in the winter. It was the longest winter of my life. It was just, not metaphorically, that's the wrong word, but just, it was cold and it was dark. And that's how life felt, on some levels.
It's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor, I guess. Yeah. But then it also kind of, it's for those that don't know, I'm on a board of a charity called Dreams for Kids DC, and we provide clinics for kids with special needs, whether it's physical or mental. And it put a different spin on that, just serving and servicing people, not necessarily just those kids, but I remember I was at the gym that first time I was at the gym, and it was already emotional, and I finished the session off with going to the basketball court and shooting the ball around. And there was this kid there just walking around with no direction on the basketball court with big like muff headphones, almost like gun range headphone things. And I know that based on working with the Dreams for Kids DC, probably he had special needs, most likely autism, just sensitive to sound. And it's interesting. I've done this in the past, but in this case, I just felt even more prompted to say something to his parents, like, hey, I might be able to help you with this. And even if you just need a break for a couple hours during one of our, whatever. And I didn't do it. And the family left the gym, and I was kicking myself. And this went on for like 10 minutes where I went back and forth. Do I say anything? Because it is an awkward situation, or could be like, hey, by the way, is there something wrong with your kid? Because you're not positioning it that way, but you're afraid that's going to come off that way.
Right.
So I was kind of kicking myself, and then I walked out of the basketball court, and they were all standing there. And I thought, oh, this is my chance. This was for a reason that they waited for whatever, So I went up to the mom, and she's like, I said, hey, by the way, is that your son? And she's like, yeah. I said, let me talk to you. And she's like, did he do something wrong? Like, what did he do? I said, no. I said, I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but does your son have special needs? She's like, yeah, he's autistic. I said, okay, great. Not the great he has autism, but great. I think I have something for you. And I told her about the program, and she called her husband over, and they seemed to going through that. It's the parents really struggle as well, because it's exhausting to, care and mentally, emotionally, and stuff like that. So it's great for the kids, and we put the kids in with all the major sports teams here in DC, and they spend a couple hours with the players. 100 kids on the ice with the Capitals and the Redskins and all that kind of thing. So what was interesting about it was he's like, the father said, well, that's my daughter over there, and she has cancer, and she looked like she was a college basketball player, and instantly I said, well, if she ever wants to talk, I just got diagnosed with kidney cancer. And it just kind of came out.
Okay.
And all of a sudden I realized in that moment, this is why this happened. So I can serve, and I can help other people. And it's just not about me. And by the way, when you do that, you're not thinking about yourself, so it actually kind of releases, the byproduct is that you're not just helping other people, you're helping your sanity, because the focus isn't on you. So the byproduct is you forget about what you're going through, and you're more happy and stuff like that. But anyway, so I looked at also, it kind of opened my eyes to the real purpose. And so for that 5.5 weeks, I was okay. The thing that bothered me, though, and I mentioned this to the family, is that despite the fact that I was okay, and I had resigned to the fact of, you know what, even if they find something, even if it is the end of this, I'm good. I found that it brought me closer to my relationship with God that I had fought pretty much all my life. I found my way I had put off getting baptized all these years. I think a lot of people might find themselves in that position. I ended up getting baptized in those 5.5 weeks. I feel that my relationship with the family got better, with friends got better. But the one thing that bothered me, even though I was okay with it, was that I hated the fact that your brother had cancer. And I really hated the fact that mom's son had cancer. And, my kid's dad had cancer. I hated that because that made it real. And I was okay, but I didn't want you guys not to be okay. I hated the fact that, I knew mom was telling her friends, for prayers and stuff that, hey, my son has cancer. I hated that. That's
Right.
what would bother me. One of the hardest calls I had to make was to Phyllis, our aunt, my dad's sister, my dad's only sister. And she was going to tell Uncle Ed as well, but I don't know why that was hard, because we lost Dad not too long prior to this, and I didn't want her to think that she was going to lose another one, And you and I are all that's left, outside of the kids, but the direct connection to Dad, we're all that's left. So I was fine when I called her, and I was driving, and I called her and said, hey, this is what's going on. Everything's fine. It's going to be fine. Surgery's going to take care of this, but, just want to let you know. She was driving somewhere. And when I hung up the phone, I just started bawling in the car. And I think it was because of Dad, because I just didn't, I don't know. I still haven't figured that out, why that was. But that was the hardest part of this whole process of not wanting my loved ones to be bothered by this or fear. Like, what was the first thing you thought of when you were told I had cancer?
Well, when I was told that you had the kidney stones and that something else was found, I was told by Jen, our sister, that it was possible cancer.
Yeah.
So in my head, I had it that it was maybe highly likely, maybe it was not. I didn't talk to you at that point, so I didn't know if it was, if they were going to biopsy or what the thing was. So I had some hope that maybe it wasn't, and I didn't know what flavor of cancer was, how strong it was, what stage it was. So I was afraid, and for me, I had Dad's death and dealing with cancer set me on my own fear, I guess, of death and cancer in its own way. So just hearing that, oh, my brother might have it, just got me thinking of you, and then also internalizing it for myself. So it was, for that time of, not knowing information was scary.
How did Mom take it? I haven't asked her.
This would just be my perception, but I think that I don't know. Mom is very good at being strong for other people.
Yeah.
So I think that she was going to be strong.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. At the end of the 5 weeks, about a week before the operation, I asked Linda, I said, we've never talked about this, but what did you think when I pulled you back into the emergency room and told you that the doctor said I had cancer? What did you think? And she doesn't show emotion a lot. And she goes, I was honestly thinking how we were going to tell the kids that you were going to die soon. And it floored me that she said it, not in a negative way, but just,
Right.
I had never thought that. And she said, why? You didn't think you were going to die? And I said, no. She goes, why? And I said, well, half of it's probably self-preservation. Like, why would anyone want to think that?
Right.
But the other part was I was fighting. Like, as soon as they told me, I was fighting. My mental state was fight. And I said, I just didn't think. I wasn't going to allow that. And I knew at the end, rationally, I have nothing to do with it. And that's the thing. People talk about, well, you fought cancer. And I did my part. Like, I tried to be positive, and I tried to get my body in the right place and my mind in the right place and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I had nothing to do with it. Like, God gave me allowed me to have a cancer that was treatable, He didn't allow it to be stage 4 and it went all over the place. He allowed it to be isolated. He allowed it to be easily treatable, curable. I had nothing to do with it, And I consider myself blessed, and that's why I mentioned in the beginning that this is my story. There's people out there that are dying of cancer and have it much, 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 much more. And I actually joined a cancer support group after all this in that 5 weeks, and I felt, what's the word? I didn't feel worthy to be there, And they all looked at me. And these are people that had several bouts of cancer and just horrible stories and lost husbands and sons. And one lady lost a husband and a son and had cancer 2 or 3 times herself. And she looked at me and says, "Don't you ever say that." And I said, what do you mean? She's like, "You had a doctor tell you had cancer. You have cancer. You're going through a process. Your journey is different as mine is to that person and this person and this person. But you're, not to say you're in the club, but you're in the club, right. Regardless of what, this is, you tell your story. Your story is valid. And that meant a lot to me. But anyway, so the next stage is surgery. I didn't ask a lot of questions. I am the king of self-diagnosing on WebMD, and I made a point to my doctor, Dr. Gary Friedlander, the best in the business in this area in DC, and I trusted him. And
you just knew they were going to take the kidney out.
Again, I knew, there was no biopsy. They were taking a kidney out. And it's funny. He said to me in my follow-up appointment about a week later, about a week later, after the diagnosis, he said, I went home that night and I told my wife that I ran into an old patient and he won the lottery. And she said something like, "Well, like the real lottery?" And he goes, No. Like, he came in for kidney stones, but we found the cancer. So without that cancer, without the kidney stones, and that's a point that we haven't talked about,
right.
I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known for years, and I wouldn't have known until it was too late, most likely. So I think that's why, in my personal beliefs, that I was blessed to get that kidney stone to facilitate this knowledge, and it was a blessing because I believe in my heart that God was saying to me, "I've been trying to get your attention for a while. You haven't been listening, typical fashion of yours. I'm going to grab your attention with this, but it's only going to be so much just to grab your attention because I have plans for you. You got to do some things, And anyway, he said, we found it. He's going to be fine, but without that kidney stone, he would never have known, and it wouldn't have turned out well. So I trusted him. And I didn't go on WebMD. I didn't want to know what the operation was. I was like, "What are you going to do?" "Well, we're going to go in, and we're not opening you up. You're going to have 4 incisions. I call them robots, but they're going to go in there with a camera and do all this stuff. And then we're not doing a biopsy. We're going to pull it out. You're going to be fine. You'll probably be okay 2 weeks after. Some people take a month, this and that," and gave me all the kind of, what fors. And then he had already treated me before 10 years prior. He's one of the best in the business in this area, if not the best. He does this operation. I think he said, I hope I'm not misquoting him, like a once a week, or certainly several times a month for the last 26 years.
Right.
So I trusted him. So I took that leap of faith of, I'm going to trust him. I'm not looking up WebMD. I'm not going down that rabbit hole of that will only incite me to doubt and get aggravated and stressed out.
Fear, concern.
And I will be in claustrophobic, health concern claustrophobia trapped in that. So I didn't do that. And over and over and over again, I literally visualized waking up from surgery, looking over to the doctor and saying, "Am I okay? Did you get everything? Did anything spread? Am I okay?" Like literally, I visualized that moment over and over and over again. And that's what happened. I woke up. Now, I don't remember any of it. I woke up. I evidently had that conversation with the doctor. I don't recall. Post-surgery. The surgery went really well. But let's go over that. I was nervous about surgery, and I was fine. But I don't want to give the impression that it was like nothing ever happened for those 5.5 weeks. I was fighting the urge to be afraid every single day.
Have you ever had surgery before?
The one time that I had surgery with this doctor, and I'll be transparent because everyone's probably thinking, "What surgery? Why is he not saying it?" I had an athletic injury downstairs. Got hit on I got jacked up on my bike down there in the Franken Beans, and apparently I had scar tissue in my urethra, and he had to go in there and fix that.
Okay.
So so it's bionic, but nonetheless.
Always has been. But.
Yeah, well, so that really is the only surgery I've ever had.
Okay.
And that was local. This is general anesthesia, and that just scared the crap out of me.
Right.
I just think weird things happen, and I didn't want to be. It's funny. I think because of what I do for a living, I tell stories, and oftentimes they're in movie scripts and stuff, and. I remember having to go before the days of drones. I had to go up in a helicopter to get some aerial stuff. And I remember just thinking, oh, great, this is going to be one of those situations where the helicopter crashes. I die. And then the next thing it's going to be like, oh, the one time a local filmmaker goes up in a helicopter, he dies. So I'm thinking, I think the worst in any of these kind of things. And I'm thinking, okay, like Glenn Fry, I think died of like a weird complication to surgery. Like, I didn't want to be that guy. So that unknown made me extremely nervous. And as I got closer and closer and closer, the week before the operation, I was just a knucklehead. I was doing everything to get distracted and not think about it. But it was very difficult for me to every day just fight that anxiety. But the operation went well. It went faster than they had hoped for. I think it lasted an hour shorter than what they anticipated. And I evidently had that conversation that I rehearsed 1,000 times with the doctor. I don't remember.
You just don't remember.
I don't remember. But the attendant that was helping me come out of anesthesia in the recovery room, I must have asked him. I must have had that conversation with him 10 times, because at one point he said to me, I'm not your doctor. He goes, you've asked me 10 times, and from what they told me, you're okay. I overheard the conversation, but you've asked me like 10 times, and you're foggy and you're out of it. I'm like, you're not my doctor. And he didn't, obviously nothing like my doctor. So I got that moment done, and then that starts the next phase, which is recovery. The joke is on me, is what I call recovery. Because I was so focused on literally getting through the surgery and literally living past the surgery. And literally I rehearsed that moment after surgery so many times and visualized it. I did not consider recovering. I didn't think I was going to be in pain. I didn't think about it. It didn't dawn on me that I was going to be in a lot of pain. It didn't dawn on me that it was a major surgery. It did not faze me one bit those 5.5 weeks. I wake up, I'm laying in the room, and I laugh. And it hurt like it hurt so bad. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't lean forward. I couldn't move. I couldn't fart. That was the big thing. Their whole thing was the smallest little things in your life, like farting and coughing and peeing, were like monumental stages that they wanted you to achieve.
Right.
And the first time I farted, they might as well threw like a birthday party for me. They were so excited, and I was so afraid to fart. And just
all of this is the complete opposite.
Right, because I'm
typical reality.
I have been known to have some gas.
Right. Then no one's cheering for farting.
No one's cheering
in regular
for farting.
world.
I just outed myself as a farter, but that's okay.
We accept you.
All right, thank you. So it dawned on me in the hospital that I'm screwed. Like, this is painful. And they had already prepped me. You're going to have an afternoon and evening to just chill out, come off of the anesthesia. But in the morning, we're pulling the catheter out, and we're getting you to walk because we don't want you to get blood clots.
Right. And are you feeling the pain in lots of places?
It just felt this whole mid area of my body was just in agony, especially when I moved.
Okay.
And I was on. So
were you afraid of that, well, I shouldn't say afraid. Given that you're a fighter, I'm imagining you were afraid to do the walking, but you had all this pain.
I knew that it was going to
your
hurt,
state?
but I knew that I had to do it. And I was an athlete for years and years and years. And I was also known for never coming off the field. So I played with broken feet. I played with dislocated kneecaps. I played with torn patella tendons. I did not want to get off the field. And again, I promise you, it's not a macho thing, because the doctors were yelling at me, "Don't be macho" and all that. It has nothing to do with that. At that time, I loved the game so much, I did not want to get off the field. In this case, I've just always applied that way of living to regular life. So if I got hurt, I remember we were having at the house years ago a backyard movie night and pig roast. You were there. And we had just wrapped up a kitchen remodel like that morning before people came over. And I was carrying about a 2x2 piece of granite that I couldn't tell you how much it weighed, like 100 pounds or something like that. And I dropped it on my foot wearing flip-flops, and I broke my foot. And I knew instantly. But we had all these people here, and I couldn't go to the hospital. I mean, that's how my brain works. So I just dealt with the pain, and then I never ended up going to the doctor about it. Well, years later, I had to go for like a shin splinter or something. And I said, "Hey, can you tell if anything was broken?" And they're like, "Yeah." And so I said, "Do both of these feet." I said, because I know that one was, I'm pretty sure that one was broken due to the granite fall. And I'm pretty sure the right foot was broken because I kicked a guy in St. Kitts playing soccer on the beach. I said I kicked him in the shin, and I think I broke it. And he came back like seconds later, minutes later after he took the x-ray, and he goes, "Yeah, you had multiple breaks on both of these feet, like at different places." So that was just my mentality of, I'm going to fight this. I know it's going to hurt. I'm just going to do it because I had to do it. Because one thing Mom always told me was, if you're going through a hard time, think about what life is like after that hard time. Visualize walking around and not being in pain. Visualize not being, not having cancer. Visualize what life is on the other side. And that's what I did. So that morning, I'm not going to lie, I asked her if I could have another hour to sleep, just so that was basically pushing the snooze alarm. I wasn't going to sleep, but that was pushing the snooze alarm of getting this catheter out, because I've had one before and it's not enjoyable. And she pulled the catheter out, and then she's like, "All right, let's walk." And what they did not tell me, is that when you get operated on, they put gas in your body to help expand the space in there so they can access certain things.
Right.
Well, not all that gas goes away, and it's trapped in there. Now, I don't know if it's a mental thing or a nerve thing or a physical pocket of gas, but they don't tell you that you're going to be in a tremendous amount. That hurt more than the incisions, because when I stood up, the gas went up my torso, and it felt like it landed up here on the top of my shoulder. And it couldn't get out. It felt like what could have been a gunshot wound. Like, it hurt so bad. And I just looked over at her. I'm like, what is this? And she's like, "Oh, they didn't tell you?" I'm like, "No, they didn't tell me. What is it?" She's like, "Oh," and she explained it. And I was in so much pain walking that I did not tie up my back. But I also was determined to get this done. So I was steps and steps and steps ahead of the nurse that was supposed to be there with me, because I just wanted to just get this done and regain my life back. That I had two nurses running after me, and I looked back because they were tugging on me. I'm like, "What are you guys doing back there?" And evidently I had flashed the whole floor, and they saw my butt. And it was some cause from some concern.
Okay.
For some of the older patients.
No applause.
No, I did not get applause. Okay. No. So I ran a little. I tried to walk a little bit faster so they couldn't catch me, and that was something. But yeah, that day.
But you didn't care either.
I didn't care. I have no pride left. That day I walked three times, and then I was supposed to be there 2 days. Ended up being there 3 days. And that second day, I literally put my running shoes on and walked all day long. Like, I just was walking and forcing myself to get past that pain. And by the third day, I felt pretty good. It hurt in my midsection, but I was feeling stronger, and it hurt less. And then you go through the, you pass gas, you go to the bathroom. I was afraid of sitting down and going to the bathroom because I did not realize, going back to I didn't ask any questions, they cut through muscle because they go through the front and then end up in the back where your kidney is. I didn't ask any questions, so I didn't realize they were cutting through muscles, and it was kind of like recovering from like a C-section almost.
Right.
So that was painful. So that was the recovery. When I got home that third day, I had a fever that night. And that's one thing that you don't want to happen. I stayed in contact with the surgical, the on-call doctor from the urologist office. And he was like, well, you either have a blood clot. There's things. He goes, I don't think you do, but generally what happens is when you have a fever, it's these three things. You just make sure it doesn't go above 103. Before I called him, it was 103 point something, and then it backed down. It was the one time at home I took aspirin or Tylenol. So that was a scary night because I just did not want to go back. I thought something was wrong. It was my kidney not responding?
Right.
What's going on? My main concern, to be honest with you, is when I was in the hospital, they put me in I don't want to say a special wing, but it's a wing meant solely for people that came out of surgery. So you get your own room, you get just top-notch service and care. And I thought, well, if I go back to the ER right now because I have a fever, they're going to stick me in some, general population. I have a roommate, generally those people are sicker than the people in the surgical, post-surgical area, more sick. So I ended up fighting through that night. I called Jen, our sister. She came over. Just to kind of keep an eye on me. She has a medical background, so I wanted her there. And then I got through that night, didn't have to go back. The fever went down. So the funny thing was, Jen and I were sitting on the couch watching TV the next morning. And I was pretty stationary because once I was in a place, I tried to stay there unless I was trying to walk.
Right.
And probably what happened was 3 days after surgery, I get home and I just wanted to see my kids because I hadn't seen the kids in 3 days because at that time, the flu was so rampant, they weren't letting kids in for visitation. So I literally got off the couch in pain and just walked. The school is 2 blocks from the house. So I walked to pick the kids up from school. They had no idea. And I picked them up, and they were just like, Noah, of course, runs over to me and buries his head in my stomach. And I'm just like, ugh. But
I envisioned you in the hospital gown walking.
No, I had sweatpants on.
Okay.
Sweatpants.
That's okay.
Yeah. But Jen and I were sitting on the couch the next day, and I was just not complaining, but she goes, you seem surprised. And I said, surprised about what? She goes, you don't think you had major surgery, and it's surprising to me that you're surprised. And I said, I just didn't want to think about it, because if I thought it was major surgery, then that would have psyched me out. If I knew they were cutting muscles, then that would have made me more anxious. If, all these things. And I said, and we had cut the cord on the cable, so I live on YouTube on Apple TV. And I said, they probably have not mine, but they probably have that operation on YouTube. So she's like, you wouldn't want to see that? And I'm like, yeah, let's see it. So I pulled it up, and that gave me the perspective of, oh, okay, I get it. I get why I'm in so much pain.
Right.
And I didn't take anything. They gave me Oxycontin. I didn't get it filled. Again, I just wanted to feel, I wanted real feelings. I wanted to know where I was, logistically in the healing process. So that was pretty interesting and cool. And he said I should be okay after 2 weeks. My goal was to be okay after a week. So, and my also goal was to conduct myself in such a manner that after all this came out and after this podcast or people would be surprised that I had cancer, I wanted to live my life where I wasn't a martyr. I wasn't talking about it. I wasn't I had throughout those 5.5 weeks, I told a handful of people. I told close friends and family. I told clients, owning a business, there were things in the pipeline that were going to happen. So I needed to tell certain clients that I'm kind of in a gray area. I'm not sure when surgery is. I'm not sure what recovery is going to be like, So I had to tell some people. But it's my goal was for people to be surprised that I had cancer. I wanted to live a life where it wasn't about me. It was, I just didn't want them to be aware of it. I just wanted life to be normal, So I was actually feeling good 2 weeks later. I was driving a week later, literally a week to the day I was driving.
Is that ahead of schedule?
The doctor did not want me to drive. And then he said I couldn't lift anything more than 10 pounds for 30 days. And then he kind of pulled back a little bit and said, well, do what you need to do if it doesn't hurt. If it does hurt, pull back and don't do it. So I ended up driving that day. And that was like freedom, like be able to get into a car, it was still winter. I had the windows down, sunroof open. I was just driving, music loud. And, but because I'm a knucklehead and because I push things too much, I pulled 2 muscles that they cut through. So that delayed my recovery 2 to 3 weeks. And that was like someone sticking a knife in my stomach every time I did certain things.
So you wanted to recover a week early.
I wanted to recover 2 weeks early.
2 weeks.
Well, a week early, 2 weeks he said that most people take a month. Some people take 2 weeks. I wanted to certainly be done 2 weeks, but I wanted to really be in a good shape 1 week after. And it ended up being, I would say I was 100% 5 weeks later, and it was only because of the torn stomach muscles. Right. So I think that leads me to life after, what happens now. And I think it's a part of my story now. It's a part of my story, which is odd in some cases because I know that on this kind of level and it's interesting. Since this happened, I've had a couple colleagues and friends that have had health issues with like their kids or themselves, and it has allowed me to have a perspective of I am not a preachy kind of dude, but it's allowed me to say, hey, listen, I know I have an idea what you're going through. This is what I just went through. Sometimes I don't even say what I just went through, but trust me, if you look at it this way, it's going to feel better. Like it's allowed me to serve in that manner, which is nice. So on this capacity, I believe this happened for me to tell the story and to help people out. And maybe there's someone listening today that is going through cancer or has a family member going through cancer or just, like what we kind of talked about, had some doubt with, their walk and faith or their doubt. And we all do, by the way, constantly. But maybe that can help them. And I resigned to that fact. And I'm actually, I've looked forward to this podcast for so long because I wanted to be able to tell the story to help people. The right. Odd part is I've been okay with this for the longest time. I resigned to the fact and accepted that I had cancer. So for me to come to you, a friend of Tom's, I usually reference myself in third person, but for this particular example, you're a friend of mine and I haven't seen you in a while and you say, hey, what's been going on? Well, what's been going on is I just went through cancer. And a lot of things have been going on, but they just want to hear or assume that they're going to hear, things are great. You know what I mean? So I have found it odd. Do I say anything? Do I say what's been going on? Like how forthcoming am I about this? And I found myself just going, listen, man, it's my life. You know, if you ask me what's been going on, you're going to get the answer. This is what's been going on. And everyone's shocked. And on some level, it surprises me that they're shocked, but I understand it because I'm so numb to the shock of it because I've lived through it, you know, and I force myself to deal with it. So it's this weird thing of how do I approach it? Because I'm just a straight shooter anyway. So I just been like, well, I had cancer. Everything's fine. Don't worry. But I had cancer. Got to, you know, whatever. And everyone just sits there like it's this little.
I think that's the shocking thing. I mean, I got to think for most people that you're there, you look healthy, you look, you know, you don't have nothing on you that says I'm a cancer survivor or anything like that. And just, you know, and you don't look any different than you were 6 months ago, maybe a little more fit, more trim. Well, but, you know, saying that I just had cancer, and if you haven't seen him in a while, that's got to be
I struggled with,
shocking.
I don't want this to be about me. You know what I mean? I don't want this to be self-serving by any means. I didn't want the podcast to be self-serving. I didn't want any of this to be about me. Because quite honestly, I don't want to live through it again. You know what I mean? I don't want to, I'm not a martyr. I don't want to be a martyr. I don't want any attention on it that way. So that was a weird dance that I dance with myself of, do I tell my story? Because I don't want, so to go back in December, when I kind of put the podcast on hold initially, or was thinking about putting the podcast on hold prior to all this happening, I was really struggling with that very aspect of the podcast. I didn't want it to be about me. I didn't want it to be self-serving. But what really made me feel kind of dirty was the social media aspect of what I had to do to promote the podcast. And there was pictures of me and I had to pose. I had to pose for pictures. That stuff drives me nuts. Like It's what I do for a living to have pose other people, but that's why I'm on the back end of the camera, not on the front end. And that's it made me very uncomfortable. But then I realized, you know what? It's a part of the game. You know, I have to do this in order to get more people to listen, because I want more people to listen, because more people are helped, hopefully, by the podcast. So I wrapped my head around that. But when I was starting to engage with people and go outside and you know, when you're recovering, although I was out and about, I wasn't going to grab a drink with a friend because I was recovering. Or I didn't go to a game because I was, you know, actually I did, but you know what I mean. You're not out and about in those circles when you're recovering. So I didn't run into a lot of people. And that was a struggle. It was just odd. It felt odd to me of, am I being unfair to them by just coming out with it that way? Do I need to walk on eggshells about this? I'm like, no, like if they can't handle it, they can't handle it. But you know, it's my, if you ask me what has been going on and how I've been doing, that's a part of it now.
Yeah.
So I didn't, you know, I'm just approaching it how the best I can be. So it's funny. It's not funny, but I find humor in it when I, you know, hey, how's it going? Oh, it's been going well. What have you been up to? How's the winter been treating you? Well, everything's fine, but I had kidney cancer. It's gone. It's fine. I'm, you know, whatever. And they're like, what? They're just like, why didn't you say anything? And why this and why that? And I'm like, listen, man, I'm okay. It's like really fine, you know? You're right. I think people are shocked that I'm fine, you know, mentally, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I don't know. But that's been an adjustment.
Well, I think that is hard. I mean, there's on the spectrum of sharing, oversharing, and not sharing anything at all. You know, where's the right thing to come into sharing with someone something that's big in your life like that. And I think that is you know, if relationships are true and meaningful, then you can say that. And it also shows that you respect them and that you're, I don't want to say confiding, but you are investing that important part of your life to them in your words that, hey, this is me and I trust you enough and care for you enough in a way to be frank and tell you that.
If I'm honest, or I don't like to say that, if I'm transparent, there's a part of me that wants to get it out there, just like this podcast. But there's a part of me that if I just ran into you and we're friends and I tell you, there's a part of me that wants it out there because I want you to know that it's not a death sentence necessarily. you know? And even if it is, you can live a life like the last arrow. You know, you can live a life where you're going to live the best regardless of what your circumstances, you know? And I'm okay with taking that mantle as being a example of how to do it. Now and then I am also very aware that I didn't have the hardest road in the world. And when it comes to cancer, Dad had a very hard road. But for me, it was, I also struggle with this podcast in the sense of I didn't tell my story in the beginning when it was just a podcast about being successful or making waves, because I didn't want to be called out of, well, wait a minute, you did this and you did that and you make mistakes. And then I realized that's going to happen the rest of my life, you know? And God's not waiting for me to be perfect to tell my story, or I'm not waiting for myself to be perfect to tell the story, because that's never going to happen. So I just have to tell my story as my journey, and where I am on this journey now. It's a struggle. When I have a friend that went through cancer a couple of years ago, and she goes, you're going to go through several journeys within the overall journey. One of the journeys is you want your real life to come back so much that you go back to living a normal life, whether it's diet or whether it's this or whether it's not, your faith, isn't as urgent as it was. And that's what I'm experiencing now in this current part of my journey with this life after cancer, is that this sense of urgency isn't there as much as it was when you have cancer, because you're on the other side of it. So that urgency, and I actually miss that urgency because I felt good in that urgency. And that sounds screwed up, but I just felt very safe in that urgency. And now on the other side of it, I don't feel as safe in that urgency. I don't know if that makes any sense or crystallizes in any way, but so it's been a struggle for me to fight normalcy. Don't go back to eating and I've incorporated meat slowly back into my diet. I try not to have meat more than 2 times a week, and I haven't had a cheeseburger in 5 months. A real cheeseburger. I only red meat that I've had was a roast beef sandwich that I made. And I'll have chicken here and there, and I'll have some shrimp and crab here and there, but still for the most part it's plant-based. But just, you put 3 pounds back on from when you got out of the hospital, and you look at it, and it's been more than 3. You don't want to go back to that normalcy. You don't want to go back to just living life with your eyes closed with the blinders on, because life has a way to take back the chaos and take back the normalcy of it. So that's what I'm fighting with now. And, my walk with God struggles a bit because you get out of it and you don't have the cancer anymore. And so it's not so you don't feel the urgency to read every day or to your walk to be as straight as it once, as it had been for a little bit. And I think everybody falls into that. It's just that's a part of your journey. That's a part of getting through it. That's a part of figuring out, all right, I got to tweak this diet back, and I got to do this and I got to do that. And that's been my biggest struggle over the last month or so. So, the other thing is for the next 5 years, I'm going to have to get tested quite often. So I have a checkup at the time of this recording in 10 days or so. And I got to get a chest x-ray. They did find some nodules in the torso scan, but they also say that though everyone has nodules, it's nothing, but they just out of obligation, I think, have to, whatever. Right. Look at it. I got to get scanned. I think I got to get scanned every 6 months. And people have warned me. Most people get anxious. And again, I go back to and I very well might be, and we'll talk about it as we go through the podcast but months from now. But I'm reverting back to the leper parable, where I'm not going to waste my life thinking about what this test is going to say, because I don't get in my car every day and drive to work or drive to the beach or drive wherever and panic about getting to an accident and dying in a car accident. I have more odds of that happening than, getting the cancer back in the other kidney. So, or anywhere else. So, I have chosen to take that perspective of I can't control that. I could die in a car accident. I could die by other means. With the way the world's going now, I could be sitting in a movie theater and have a gun pointed at me, which that's actually already happened before in my life. So, it is what it is. And for people out there that are getting these periodical tests, that's what my suggestion would be. Just live your life, try not to think about it, because if you have cancer, you already have it. If you have 2 months before your next test, have those be the greatest 2 months of your life. Because if it's a negative scan, in a good way, if the results are negative, meaning you don't have cancer or anything came back or whatever, you just have the greatest 2 months of your life, and you can keep that momentum going. If you do have cancer, at least you just had the greatest 2 months of your life. But if you did have cancer and you lived those 2 months fretting about those 2 months and what's going to happen, you just wasted 2 months of your life where you could have had fun and could have made relationships and could have changed people's lives and could have changed your life in those 2 months. So that's how I'm approaching it. Maybe, there might be another cancer diagnosis in my future. I don't know. I hope not, but I don't know. It could be a car accident. Anything could happen. So, going forward, what does life look like after this? I think life for me looks like trying to strike my last, when I'm dead, I want my quill to be empty. I want to strike all those arrows while I'm alive. So when I look back, I'm not regretting anything. And, I haven't been the most perfect human being, far from that. I've made a lot of bad choices in my life. And what I've realized, certainly over the last year, was that it's not going to change unless you make the choice to change it. And if you're fighting for things that aren't fighting back for you, if you're giving up yourself for things that aren't helping you, if you're fighting for things that are not healthy for you, it's not going to end well. So, going forward, health is a priority, but then those moments you have with I'll tell you this story. About a week and a half, 2 weeks, week and a half after my surgery, Sadie, my 8-year-old, your niece, wanted to go scooting in front of the house.
What is scooting?
The scooter, like the 2-wheel scooter thing, the Razor scooter.
Right. Okay.
Well, we have adult scooters, so they're bigger wheels, bigger frames, whatever, so we can all do it together. And I hadn't done anything athletic or anything in those week and a half, 2 weeks. And it was a Saturday morning. Her and I went to this place, Carmen's, in the neighborhood to get some bagels. And we brought them back. And she goes, "Hey, do you want to go scooting?" And everyone was asleep. And it was one of those Saturday mornings where it was a late winter, 60-degree, 70-degree morning, and we were just out scooting. And I was taking it light, but it was just quiet, and it was just the two of us on the street together, and we weren't even saying anything to each other. And I would just look at her, and I would just see the smile or the way the wind was pushing her hair. And I remember just saying, I very much appreciate this moment, because I didn't think I didn't know if I was going to have it again. And I find myself doing that more and more and more, just kind of sitting back and looking at the situation that I'm in and just looking and like at Easter, like with all the family there and all that. It's nice to have those moments and just kind of look around and just kind of take a mental picture and just be grateful.
Right.
And that's one big thing, is I found that being grateful and practicing gratitude through all this, I would actually be thankful that I had cancer, because it gave me the opportunity to do X, Y, Z. It gave me the opportunity to serve. It gave me the opportunity to realize my, certain, what's the word? Purposes, So I was actually very thankful for those moments. And it sounds counterintuitive to be thankful for cancer, but I actually found it rewarding, to think about it that way. And it took the sting off of it as well. But I don't know. And in terms of the podcast, it's back. It's going to feature more, personal stories of other people. It's still going to be what it's still going to be, or what it was, but I'm kind of taking the reins off of it. So if conversation wants to go to faith, it's going to go to faith. If it's going to go to, cancer, it's going to go to other people, other people's or other people's struggles. It's not necessarily going to be about, so-and-so's morning routine and how that made him an extra $1 million,
Right.
So I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to actually get back on social media. I didn't want to get back on because I wanted to wait to make an announcement and have this podcast come out because I didn't want to act I didn't want to act. The irony here is I didn't want people thinking I had cancer. Like, I wanted to live a life where no one would know. But I also didn't want to feel that people felt cheated by that, meaning if I was posting all these, hey, look at me at this and look at me at this, look at the kids and look at this, but then come out with, hey, I had cancer, they'd be like, well, wait a minute. Why didn't you tell me in the first place?
Right.
So I was kind of calculated in that I've stayed off social media until this all came out, so I could be transparent about it, and then resume. That I've actually missed taking pictures of my vans and putting it up on Instagram. So, is there anything you wanted to ask me over the last 5.5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 3 months?
What have you found hope in?
Well, personally for me, and again, I'm not a preachy guy. I don't hit people over the head with anything. I say, this is what works for me. Try it out. It could work for you. I believe in what works for me. What I found hope for was that I know that I would not have been able to get through this without my relationship with God. And it's not a, hey, I thank God for this Grammy Award, and not to take any away from people that say that. But when you're in a dark place in a hospital room by yourself and you just were told that you had cancer, nothing matters, The car you drive doesn't matter. How much money you got in your bank or don't have in your bank. Some award I just won for the best blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter, I had always said this, that you could be surrounded by people on your deathbed, but it's still a very one-on-one thing. You could be surrounded by 1 million people on your deathbed, but it's still you yourself going on the other side, whatever that you believe that other side is. It's an alone kind of thing. And when you're alone, I found hope that my relationship, I was working on it, and I found peace in that for me. I also found hope in that I love this life, I found hope in the fact that I realized that doing the right things, good things happen out of that. I found hope in the fact that the things I could control what goes in my body. I could control my attitude about certain things. I could control my actions towards certain things. No one was going to walk for me in that hospital. I had to walk myself. No one was going to, and by the way, I didn't eat any of the food in the hospital. I didn't eat any either. I
saw the beverages they had on your cart.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
And they were nothing that I knew you would drink.
Oh.
Lots of sugar.
It's amazing to me And I'm gonna thank the hospital, Shady Grove Hospital. They did an amazing job taking care of me. The people could not have been more nice and more supportive, and they were awesome. However, hospitals are some of the sickest places you can go, and the food that they give you is not the food that you need to eat to get better recovering from anything. And the 3 days that I was there at the hospital, it's nothing but sugar drinks. Gatorades and sugar drinks and fake apple juice and fake orange juice and fake this and fake that. And I didn't drink any of it. Yeah. I had some Gatorade because I lost a lot of, stuff. But
right.
I would use Groupon, not Groupon. Grubhub, sorry. I would use Grubhub to have food delivered. And I wouldn't eat their food.
Did you have an Impossible Burger at the hospital?
Did I?
I'm gonna guess
I did not. Well, I tell you why. I didn't eat a lot.
You weren't eating a lot.
The thing that helped me.
It took you a while to ramp up.
The thing that helped me not eat very much at the hospital was I was afraid. We'll wrap up the podcast with this thought. I was petrified of going to the bathroom because I didn't know how bad it was going to hurt because
everything's related and intertwined. Yeah. And
so my thought was if I don't eat, I won't have to, because prior to going to the operation, you got to empty yourself out.
Yeah.
So I didn't have anything in me except liquids. So I put off eating. So finally the second night I was like, I'm starving. So I ordered pasta, like spaghetti and marinara sauce from a local restaurant. But I wasn't about to eat anything. Excuse me,
from the hospital.
No.
I do have one other question.
Yeah.
So Dad had cancer and we would care for him, and at times it was hard to identify with, what he was going through. Did you through your own journey, have any extra insight into maybe like what he was experiencing or feeling or fears?
I think some people... And quite honestly, I think we are all those same people. I think you have two choices. You either strike your arrows as hard as you possibly can, or you do a half job at doing it. And I don't think all of us are all one of those. I think we have moments in our life where we strike them all as hard as we can, and I think we have moments in our life where we don't. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's absolute. I think our goal should be more of striking them as hard as you can and minimizing the other times. But because there's been many times where I haven't striked them in other facets, not cancer. Even, there's been times where I didn't strike them as hard as I should have during cancer as well. But, again, it's that whole thing. If, throw a stone if you don't think that you've done anything wrong, and no one's throwing stones. So.
Right.
But, it's been a very interesting winter on many levels. But I certainly think that I know that I'm not the same person that I was January 6th, 2018, that I am now. What's today? April 3rd, 2018. And I'm not going to be the same person on April 4th. So, it is what it is. So I do want to take this time before we wrap this up to thank my doctor, Dr. Gary Freelander, and then Dr. Roberto Pedraza, who performed the operation. Those guys literally had my life in their hands. So I want to thank them for their expertise. And the follow-up to the operation, I did ask them. I said, listen, I actually watched the operation, not mine, but an operation like that. I said, I have so much respect for you, not, like, oh, you're a doctor, but just like, how the heck did you figure, like, that's crazy. Like, right. Digging in there and doing this. And how do you know, how you learn how to do that is beyond me. Like, I think a ginormous amount is learning a new editing program that I have to do, especially at 45. But to do what he's doing, it's crazy. And then knowing if you one little fraction of an inch, you could kill somebody. It's like crazy. Right. To me, it's crazy. Shady Grove Hospital, like I've already talked. Dr. Rhonda Patrick, she's been such a great resource for me. To pick her brain about all things, health and eating right and longevity and cancer and stuff. So look her up online. She has a lot of resources online. And I owe a ginormous gratitude to Erwin McManus from Mosaic out in California. One day I would love to sit down with him and tell him the story personally, but his book and his teachings throughout and since and even before have really got me through a tough time. And then my home church, Pastor Steve Holmesy, he was very instrumental in helping me just pick my brain and make sure checking in. When someone just checks in with you, it means a lot. And of course my family, my friends, Linda and the kids. Everyone was great, but I do want to point out our sister Jen, who in the middle of the night, I don't even know what time it was, maybe certainly it was late, and she's coming over just because I have a fever, right. And she was at the hospital, and she was great. So so that's where I've been. That's what's happened.
You're back.
I'm back.